Welcome to everyone. Welcome to everyone who is joining us tonight live and also on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. I guess we're not using YouTube tonight, are we, Don? Just Facebook. Okay. I'm Bob Strasberg, and I am a member of the Christian Business Board, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our entire team to tonight's presentation. We are just so grateful that we have Dan Reinhardt with us tonight, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him tonight. Tonight's presentation is about conflict in Christian leadership, and Dan's going to share his expertise on that subject with us. The Christian Business Board's mission is to enable Christian professionals in all walks of life to be able to live out their ministry calling in the workplace. And tonight's presentation hopefully will do exactly that. It will help to lift you up and enable you, whatever your role is in business or ministry. And Dan's wisdom will help us to deal with conflict wherever we find ourselves. Just would like to open up with a word of prayer here tonight, just get us started here. Father God, we're just grateful for our time together tonight, and we're grateful to have Dan Reinhardt with us tonight. We pray for your blessing over our time together tonight, and we just ask that you'll open our hearts and minds to the wisdom that we will receive from Dan. And we just pray that the technology will work well, and that we'll just be edified by what we hear tonight and how we interact with each other. So we just praise you in Jesus' name for technology and for the ability to come together and prepare to serve you wherever we find ourselves. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Let me tell you a little bit about Dan. Dan actually grew up in India. His parents were missionaries there, and came back to North America and went to college in the US as an undergraduate, went to graduate school in Israel. That sounds like a fascinating subject that we'd like to hear more about at some point in the future. But he became a pastor at Hillcrest and Bethel Evangelical Missionary Churches in Alberta. And he just was working there, and all of a sudden at the age of 43, was the leader of a large and growing organization, and he was worn out. So he decided that he was going to just pursue another avenue, and he earned a doctorate of ministry from Asbury Seminary. And he studied in particularly how leaders are transformed and how they're led into an anointed life in North America. After his earning his doctorate, Dan formed Crest Leadership Center. And the whole point of that is to help people become passionate about finding their calling, particularly as we approach midlife in our professional careers. We tend to go into a decline in terms of our enthusiasm and passion towards what we're doing and how to serve people. And Dan has spent the last 20 years helping people get repassionate and be able to find their calling and find their role that will help them live the best part of their careers in the latter part of their lives. Crest has hundreds of graduates, and they have emerged as a premier life and leadership program for men and women in the mid-years who want their life to matter and to flourish. Dan and his wife, Anne, reside in Alberta, Canada, and have 4 grown children. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Dan.
And I will add 13 grandchildren. So
oh my goodness.
We are busy, and it's been wonderful. But you're right. I have been involved in leadership all my life, and found out that leadership is fun until you have a conflict. And then it gets tough. And thankfully, most of my leadership experience was in a positive environment, a growth experience, and good team members. I look back on those years of leading, especially the large church, as really good years. But there did come some conflict, and it will come to every leader. Every time we try to lead something, somewhere along the way, conflict's going to come. And so I look back on this, and I kind of put some lessons together, and I put it in this way. I want to lead, but man, I hate conflict. Why does there have to be so much drama going on around leadership? And you and I all got involved in our leadership issues because we were passionate about the cause. We had a vision, we had something we wanted to contribute to, we were excited about it, we got involved, we began to go forward, and then conflict shows up. And this is just not what we really planned on. And it can really shake us because while we love what we're trying to do, it's this people stuff that just gets in the way. And then, why do I get so emotional about things? Because how come other people get so emotional? Well, in this time together, I'm going to talk to you about some of the myths that are surrounding leadership and conflict. And I want to help you understand why sometimes your good efforts that try to resolve conflict just don't work in some situations. And we'll talk about different kinds of conflict. That was a real surprise to me. And then we'll help you discover some practical biblical roots to deal with conflict. But I want to begin with this factor here about myths around conflict. And we as Christian leaders are particularly susceptible to these myths, quite frankly, because we think Christians should always get along, shouldn't they? I mean, we're all following Christ. Have we all given our life to Christ? Shouldn't we get along? Are we called brothers and sisters? Isn't that what the Bible talks about? Shouldn't we be getting along? And in fact, if we're just nice enough, everybody will like me. We're all Christians. We're going to get along just good. And in fact, people love to be challenged with vision, don't they? And isn't that what good Christian leadership's about, is having a vision and moving forward and taking ground for God? Well, that's a myth, quite frankly. Not everybody does like vision. And we'll explain that in just a little bit here. And then how about this one? Well, I am the leader, so people should follow. I mean, after all, I am named as the leader. So shouldn't they just come along? Isn't that what they hired me to do, is to be the leader? And then here's another one. Maybe if I'm being nice and just try to ignore things, it'll just go away. Boy, those are 5 myths that I identified when I look back on my time. And this idea that Christians should always get along, found out that wasn't quite what I thought it would be. I was nice to everybody that I could be, and I thought that they would be nice back. Found out that doesn't always work. I thought vision was a great thing because it excited me, and I loved vision. I wanted to move ahead and do great things. Found out that some people don't like vision because it means change. And they find change hard. And I thought, well, since I'm named the leader, shouldn't people just follow? And maybe if I just forget about things, it'll get better. Found out that didn't work. But I'd like to just have a little time to just ask you who are on the call here, have a little dialogue time here. Have you seen this? Have you seen some myths in your experience? What's one aspect about conflict that surprised you when you began to lead? And what was an underlying assumption that maybe you found out proved to be false? Let's just have some dialogue around this. What have you observed?
I noticed that people, especially the work that I did, it was pioneering work. And so I figured if they came on board as staff or volunteers, they would be excited about the vision because I knew it was a new venture. And several of them were not challenged by the vision, were excited and actually, came against it.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? You sign up with an organization and then fight the vision.
Dan,
always
one thing. Go ahead, Bob.
I've found I kind of agree with your the antithesis of your first point there, that I was in conflict situations with Christian leadership in churches and in other ministry situations, and people who are solidly grounded in the Bible couldn't apply biblical principles to the way that they dealt with each other, and taking on a peacemaking role in that situation becomes extremely difficult, because you try to hold them accountable to what Jesus said about conflict, and they don't want to have any part of it.
Very interesting over the years, doing ministry and being in churches in 4 different states and ministry for 46 years. Every one of these are a myth, and what you have to learn and what God teaches you on how to meet those challenges where they are, and allow God to help you move forward in order to bring that balance and that come along, and that trust and that vision are all extremely important. I think the one for me over the years that has been the most difficult, people ignoring the conflict and allowing it to become into this giant elephant until it explodes, whether it's in counseling, whether it's something in the home, whether it's something in the business, or even something in the church.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, Linda. Adding on to that is that I think one of the myths is that we have to wait for the conflict to be really bad before we do something about it, or conflict is always a bad thing. But there's such a thing as healthy conflict too, in terms of different opinions and things. And then the key is to identify that early enough so that it doesn't become into a bad thing. So conflict itself isn't necessarily bad. It's when it starts to go too far, and then by then some damage is done, and people revert to, or I revert to maybe more extreme measures, and that's when it can get ugly.
Or not even having the wisdom and the leadership of bringing people along and watching and observing and preparing people. You just can't come on as a new staff person and just change everything. You're only a leader if you have people following you. So, and you got to pay attention to these myths, because they'll turn around and bite you.
Well, have you seen other than this? These are just 5 that I put up here. What are maybe some other myths you've observed? Anything else? Well, it seems like those 5 are pretty common. I couldn't hear that, sorry. I couldn't hear that person. So I guess we'll move along. So let's go along here to say, well, why does conflict then come with leadership all the time? Well, one reason is that people are passionate about the cause, and so they have opinions. You're passionate about the cause, so you have an opinion. And if you bring on staff members that you want to have engaged and you want them to be on with this mission, well, if they really do engage with everything that they've got, they will have opinions. And it'll mean that sometimes you as the leader are going to have to make decisions between opinions. And not everybody likes that, because unfortunately, not every opinion will necessarily be enacted on. And so you can end up with some passion because people believe in the cause, but they differ in how to get there. And if you're a good leader, you're going to have powerful people on your team, and they're going to have opinions. And then there are times when you're initiating change, quite frankly. You make those decisions, you initiate change, and change stirs some things in people. And not everybody handles change the same way as you do. Not everybody likes change. Some people like it to be very consistent and just kind of predictable. And others love to innovate and try all kinds of new things. And depending upon who's on your team, you will have some different opinions and different feelings going on when you are initiating your vision. And then here's the other thing, is that there can be hidden agendas.
Mhm.
Oh my. But sometimes they're in you. And sometimes it's in them. And sometimes we're not even aware of it. We just feel it. And sometimes it begins to show up in attitude or actions or emotion. And sometimes we're not even sure why. But there's stuff down inside that's getting triggered. Or maybe there's a goal beyond this particular thing. There's an agenda that somebody's got, and they're trying to make things happen. So you end up with some conflict. So even though we love a cause and we like being involved as a leader, we are going to have conflict like this, friends. And I can see on this call, we got seasoned leaders. And so you seem to be nodding your head that, yeah, that's true. That's true. So here's some things I suggest. I suggest facing it earlier or it gets harder. If we leave it too long, it can fester. Now, actually, if you want to text this word, the word conflict, to this number, then we'll send you the PowerPoint, so you don't have to worry about trying to take all the notes, because I've got in this next slide, there's quite a bit here in this slide. But you're welcome to scribble notes as you go along. But I'd be glad to give you the diagram when we're done with the webinar here. So here's one thing that I found out that surprised me. I did not realize that there's different kinds of conflict and different levels of conflict that require different strategies to work with them. And I only learned this after conflict erupted in my church. And I discovered that my ordinary ways of dealing with conflict no longer worked, because I just thought everybody would just sit down, discuss things, come to a good idea, and work it out. That's how I thought everybody handled conflict. And I found out that strategy just
close button to activate. Say press the button. Alt, C.
So let me show you this chart here. This is a chart that talks about there's levels of conflict here, and you're going to be able to tell what level you're at by the communication that you hear in these boxes here. The higher the conflict, the more the tension in the room. So let me explain this chart as you go along. We find out that we get the first one coming. The lowest level, or the easiest level of conflict, is what we would call problems to solve. Now, when you're at this level here, everybody wants to find the solution. They want to collaborate, and it's a win-win situation. We're meeting together, and we're going to have open, straightforward communication, and it'll be focused on the issue. And there won't be much tension in the room, because we're simply meeting as friends to deal with a problem, work it out. And this is great. A lot of problems get solved right there. But not all problems do. Sometimes the problems get a little tougher, and we would call them a disagreement. Now, in this level, the objective shifts a bit. You want to protect yourself. You're willing to compromise a little bit. You're still looking for win-win, but there's more tension in the room at this level. And the communication style is guarded. You'll hear sarcasm starting up, but at least the facts are intact. But you do recognize that it's a little more difficult than this first level of just solving a problem. These are disagreements. But unfortunately, it can get worse. You can get to a contest level. Now, at this level, you'll hear misunderstanding, disrespect, and facts are starting to fade away. And you find that the two or more people that are in the conflict, they want to put their opponents in their place, and something shifts at this level. It now becomes win-lose. There's a psychological shift when you get to this level. It's no longer win-win. Someone's going to lose. And you feel it in the tension in the air, because now it becomes a contest about who is going to win this one, because one of you is not going to win. But it can get worse yet. It can get to this point where it's fight or flight. It's tough. Right here, just a second, I'll have to turn that off. Somebody's trying to, I'll just turn him off there. Fight or flight is when it now gets to the point where people want to hurt their opponent or force them out. Like, this is not just putting them in their place. It's like force them out, like be gone from here. And you can tell you're at this place because the communication has accusations in it, false testimony, even passive aggressive behavior. Oh, this is not a fun level to be at, because this is where dysfunctions really, really do show up. But it can be worse than that even. And that is, it can be what we might even call war. This is where the objective becomes to destroy your opponent regardless of the cost. And unfortunately, when it gets to this level, no one wins. It's just destruction everywhere. And at this level, the communication is hateful, irrational, and you feel the personal attack happening. So when I was in my situation and conflict erupted, I tried to come at it at a problem level, to just sit down and talk about these things. And I discovered people weren't ready to do that. For some people, when they start conflict, they start at level 3. They start with a win-lose attitude already. They're not here to try and come to a good situation together. So the psychological shift that comes between the disagreement and the contest is a critical one to understand, because most problems can be handled at the bottom 2 levels. At problems and disagreements, you can probably handle that by yourself. But when it shifts to win-lose, you can't do it by yourself. You've got to bring other people in. You need someone else in the room to bring some accountability to what's going on in levels 3, 4, and even 5. But there's different strategies that we have to use at these different levels. Now that revelation was such an eye-opener to me, because then I understood for the first time that some of the people that I was dealing with were operating at level 4. They wanted to force me out. There was no wanting to solve a problem. They wanted me out. And I did not know how to handle it. Did not know how to handle that. That was beyond my experience, beyond any training I'd had. And I went to prayer and I said, Lord God, help me. I don't know, do not know what to do with this. And that's when the Lord did answer prayer. And I was out visiting a newcomer to the church, and they're a wonderful couple. They said, well, would you like to see my library downstairs? Sure, I'll come see your library. Went downstairs and I was scanning over his books, and there, sitting in the library, was a book that said, Antagonists in the Church. And I thought, wow, that sounds like something I need help with. I borrowed the book, and friends, that's where I learned about these 5 levels. So the Lord rescued me out of that. I did not lose, thankfully. But let me ask you, in your experience, have you seen these different levels happening? Do you recognize these different levels? And what was your experience like when you were involved in one of these higher levels of conflict? And how did your leadership how did you try to handle it? And what did you learn from this?
Well, unfortunately, I've been in 2 wars in a church. And you are exactly right here, where people just lost all rational sense of right or wrong. They would take every opportunity to undermine their opponents, and eventually all the people involved wound up leaving the church because
Wow.
it became so toxic. It was just unacceptable, and they were all either forced out or encouraged to leave on their own volition. And eventually new people came in. These were staff members, and we reestablished the leadership of the church, but it was in one case, it was a 2-year journey, and extremely painful for the lay leadership of the church to watch this and to participate in this happening.
Yeah. For sure.
I would like to take it back to a myth that I just thought of because of what you presented. And one of the myths is if you're in leadership, you're willing to be held accountable. And that goes within the myths of that of when you pick leadership, because they have a position or a title, or they like what's happening. You're hired because you're going to be a yes person and you're going to help them achieve, but you don't look at the level of character, their home life, and some history to find out the level at which they are capable of being a leader. Been involved in more than one church situation, and it really depended on humility, whether they really wanted a result that would complement and support where they felt God was taking them, or was it going to be a personal battle of egos and power plays to win. Of course, when you have the humility and willing to talk and be honest with each other and have a work of God through the Holy Spirit, then you can actually get something accomplished.
It does require that humility.
But I've been in places of at every level that you have presented.
Yeah.
Over the years.
And here's the fact is that your leadership within your church or your organization, your leadership will go up or down depending how you handle this. If you know how to handle it, people will appreciate you, and your leadership value will go up in their minds. If you blow it, you lose credibility. So we have to learn how to do this. And I'm not saying I'm a big expert on it. I'm just saying I learned from hard experience, and this has been very helpful, plus some more things I'll be sharing with you. What then can we do about this? So let me give you some suggestions of what you can do. You have to begin with self-awareness. Begin with self-awareness. And do you think that conflict is good or bad? If you have a deep core value of peace at any price, you will view any conflict as bad. And if you do view every dissenting opinion as bad, you will end up with a lot of conflict happening, because it'll go from being around the issue to being around you. And conflict, you notice the difference between the first 2 levels in that chart and the last 3. The issue is after level 2, it's win-lose. It's about the people now instead of the issue. So if you don't deal with issues, it will escalate to being a personal thing between you and them. So if you like peace, deal with stuff quick before it's tough, before it's worse. Here's the other thing about your self-awareness. You need to understand that you do have a default style of handling leadership. You have an automatic style. As soon as conflict erupts, you have an automatic style of conflict. I got the wrong word there. You have an automatic way of dealing with things. I mentioned to you, my automatic way was to sit down and just have a talk. And I didn't know how to do it anymore in any other way than that. But you will understand that when you are in conflict, you are going to be automatically going a particular direction with it. And that'll be part of your personality. So in this self-awareness piece here, the first thing we got to deal with is us. Because sometimes it's we who are causing the problem. It's we who are making it worse because of the way we handle things. So I want to start with us, and then we'll talk about how to deal with other people. When it comes to your default conflict management style, here's another diagram that's really helpful to think it through. In this diagram here, there's the chart. This axis of the graph is the issue. In other words, at the small part here, it's a small issue. At the top of this graph, it's a big issue. And then on this axis, it's the relationship. On the left-hand side, it's minor relationship. It doesn't matter much. Or on the right-hand side, the relationship really matters, and it's very important. And whenever you have conflict, you are going to have an interplay between these two things, the issue and the people. So let's talk about the different conflict resolution styles that this thing will talk about. The first one is avoiding. This is when the issue doesn't matter and the relationship doesn't matter. Well, just don't get involved with it. Just avoid it. It's okay. You don't have to decide to die on every little hill that comes by. So don't waste your time with little things that don't matter and with relationships that really have no pertinence to your situation. So you can avoid by you can just avoid some. But there's another kind, and that would be competing. And this is when the issue is really important, way up here. And the relationship is secondary. You are so committed to the issue that you're willing to let relationship go over this. That's called competing. Now, there's another opposite to this, and that is this one here, accommodating. And this is where the relationship means so much to you that you will just go for peace and forget about the issue. It doesn't matter. It's the exact opposite because you're so people-oriented. And then there's the final one, which, no, not final, second to last one, compromising, is where the issue matters and the people matter, and you're willing both to go halfway. You're willing to bend on the issue a little bit because you want to preserve the relationship, so you bend and you come to a compromise. And compromising is not a bad word. Unfortunately, in some groups of people, the idea of compromise is like wrong. You should never, ever compromise. Well, on some issues, that's true. But when it comes to conflict, when it comes to dealing with a disagreement, compromising actually is a good thing because you're willing to let your brother or your sister have a little bit of a say in the whole thing. And you're willing to be humble enough to say, well, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I am willing to let my idea be amended and changed a bit. Let's come to an agreement together by compromising. I don't get everything I'm looking for, and they don't get everything they're looking for, but we're coming together on it. That's a good compromise. But there's an even better one, and that is collaboration, where you work together because the issue is important and the relationship is really important. And you're willing to work on this until you come to perhaps a better idea than you had in the first place. And it's maybe better than what they had in mind. But because you engaged in a healthy working together on it, you ended up with a better idea than either of you had. Now, wouldn't that be great if all conflict was like that? But it's possible. However, the first piece of self-awareness is when you begin to feel the tension rising in the room, you are going to go to one of these. You know, in my Crest leadership program, I used to say after this, okay, well, you know, what's your style? And everybody said, well, it's collaboration. No, it's not. You wish it was collaboration. You can tell what your real default style is when you get into a place where the tension is up and you're feeling the tension, where do you end up going?
Dan, can I just make a quick comment?
Yeah.
So this chart brings to mind another fallacy or another myth, is that conflict always has to be us against somebody or somebody against us. The reality is that, you know, this chart, they have this chart too. So we have this chart and they have this chart. What makes this chart work is the relationship. So one of the keys that I have found is figure out a way that it's not me against you, it's us together against the problem. And that's what I mean by collaboration. We're both sitting on the same side of the table. And this is a part of negotiation, proper negotiation, which again, negotiation has a negative connotation of we're fighting about something, but the reality is we could have common interests and look at the problem together and come up with something that's completely unique and different than either one of us actually see.
Yeah, that's right. So can some of you, any of you, give some examples of issues that you hit up against and you've intentionally chose a different style of conflict management that worked? Can we share some stories on that?
Well, just building off the comment I just made, I know I was in one situation where there was really a showstopper where there was no way that this, you know, the other person would, quote, give in. And that certainly is not the outcome that I wanted, because we wanted, you know, I was striving for, and we both really wanted a win-win, but it looked like there wasn't a way to do it. So what I believe really worked was continuing to try to just see what their perspective was and understand why they would be coming from that perspective, have empathy about it, and then try to find out what their, you know, what they really were trying to accomplish, and then brainstorm around it. And we wound up with something that turned the whole thing around, and it's developed into even better relationship ever since. Wonderful.
So going to asking them what is their hope or their dream or their desire out of this. Very good. Yeah, because usually people, unless they have a hidden agenda, usually people, they want something to work. They just, they have something in mind that they would love to see happen, and they're passionate about it.
I think we think conflict shouldn't take time, that we resolve it. And when it comes up like an elephant, or it comes up in the room, or we don't want to deal with it right away, we actually let it get larger until it gets out of control. When you realize you've come together as leaders and divine appointments with God has anointed that for you to come together, you're willing to talk, brainstorm, give and take, and have a spirit of unity, not division, to glorify God and not divide, and then work at it until there is a resolve in the conflict that everyone is participating in. And it's hard work. I know of one church that they won't make a decision in direction, and they have pastors and they have elders. But when they make a final decision and vote on something, it has to be unanimous, or they'll work through it until it is. And I think I've watched them have a real strength in their leadership of the church that is very solid for their congregation.
So to do that, they are committed to collaboration and at least collaboration or compromising to the point where they all agree this is going to be good. Yep. That's good. So as you're looking at this chart and thinking about these things, there may be a conflict issue that maybe is current happening in your sphere of life that you may, hopefully, if you're looking at this chart and hearing some of these stories, maybe there's a way to do things differently. Maybe it doesn't have to end up in a big blowout. Maybe there's some things that you can initiate, and it'll take some humility on your part and also some confidence and some awareness, which we're trying to give you today, that perhaps there's more than just one road on this one.
Mhm.
So let's just switch to some biblical teaching around conflict management. And that is Jesus' teaching. It's interesting that Jesus was one who knew a lot about conflict because he was going through it a lot. And he was a master at dealing with it. And it's interesting that he taught in principles and in stories most of his teaching. But when it came to conflict, that was the one time he gave steps. You do this, then this, and then this, because he knew that this was the issue that we have the hardest thing with. We don't know what to do. But Matthew recorded it like this. If your brother sins, go point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen, you've won them over. If they won't listen, then you do this, then you do that. So let's just take this one at a time. You know this passage, I'm sure. So let's just talk about these in one at a time. In step one, what we want to do here is to begin with a one-on-one meeting. Not texting, not emailing them, meeting with them, talking with them. Now, if you're geographically too far away, there is Zoom or something like this where you can actually try to just get together with them a little bit. Try to meet with them if you can on a one-to-one basis. And the point of this meeting is to clarify the issue. Understand what it is, that's the problem, and own your part in it. You're looking for reconciliation. So the goal here is to resolve the problem, restore the relationship, and the outcome that you really want is win-win. Jesus said, start there. That's number one. Then he said, if that doesn't work, then you have to go to step two. And now you have to bring one or two others along to this next meeting. And this increases objectivity and gives accountability for what's being said in the meeting. And you can see that this is when it gets tougher now. And instead of just letting things fly, you bring others in, and it helps moderate the meeting. The goal still is to a win-win. If Jesus said, but sometimes that doesn't work. You have to go on past this step 2 to step 3. And now you have to ask that person to go with you to the leaders and the managers. Now, the first thing is that now you're having to go to those who are in authority. It says there in Matthew, tell it to the church, but I don't think that means get up and say it in a big congregational meeting. I believe it's the New Testament model is when there's a question, it's the leaders of the church that get together and deal with it. For example, when the big question about eating meat offered to idols, they had a meeting, but finally it was the leaders that decided. And there's a leadership meeting involved. Anyway, step 3 is you ask that person, let's go and we'll talk to the leaders. And what they're going to do is they'll probably try to bring some kind of mediation, which is a compromise type of kind of thing. But if that doesn't work, then they're going to bring arbitration. They're going to decide one way or the other on something. And with that, there's supposed to be closure. Jesus said, you bring it to the church, they decide. And this is important, that the issue should be closed because the leadership has concluded. So sometimes people still don't abide by that. And you got to go to step 4. And I'm just so amazed how Jesus is very honest and practical about life and leadership and about conflict. Some people won't let it go, even though it's been decided by the leadership. They won't abide by the decision, and they are just continuing to fester the problem. And you know what? This is when we sometimes have to move forward by subtraction. We hate this, but it has to happen sometimes. Jesus said sometimes you have to treat them like you would a tax collector or a Gentile. They're really not part of the family. They're outside of that, unfortunately. And we're talking about having to move to this place where we recognize that the continued presence of antagonistic people can bring momentum to a grinding halt. Because the people that are at this level of conflict are not just simply disagreeing with you or with your vision. Their goal, by the time you get to these high 4 and 5 levels, their goal is destruction. And they feel they're right to destroy. And someday reconciliation might be possible, but not right now. Right for now, though, the issue is closed, and the door for reconciliation may be open for later, but right now, you'd have to start again from scratch with these kinds of people. And you'll notice how early in the process, Jesus recommends bringing other people into it. Don't try to solve these tough problems by yourself. It just is very difficult for you and for everybody involved. And if it doesn't resolve at the lower levels, you've got to bring other people in here. And I'm thinking here that of a situation where, in fact, I think I have 2 of them. There were 2 times that in my work with people in severe conflict, when they were at this level here, they had such intense pain that it was just draining the church of their life. And they came to me and said, what can we do to help here? We talked about these steps. They took some of the steps, and when they came to the end, there was a meeting where they had to make a decision, and then the person actually left. And it just brought relief to the whole congregation. But there were some in the congregation who thought that if we're just humble enough, or if we're just nice enough, or if we're just Christian enough, we should be able to solve any problem. But even Jesus said in Matthew 18, no, sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes there is a parting of the ways. But notice that it's not just suddenly going there. There's a process. You start at the low level and you move up. And this is where, if you're on a board, or if you're the leader in an organization, and someone is really upset about something, and they want to come straight to the board, they want to come right to the board and have a meeting right off the bat. Well, you have to open up Matthew 8 to them and say, that's not how Jesus said we do it. Have you talked to the person that you've got this conflict with? Have you talked with them? And if they say yes, say, well, what happened? Well, it didn't work. Did you take someone else to go with you to talk with this person? Well, no, I haven't done that yet. Well, then you can't bring it to the board until you do step number 2. You go talk with them. You bring someone along with you. And you have to work up the level of responsibility, the level of authority within the organization. So when I was leading the church, we had some conflict happening. I gave a really good teaching about Matthew 18 and explained to everybody, this is what we are a Bible believing church. Let's abide by this. And just so you know, if we get anonymous letters to the board, we put them in the waste paper basket. So don't even, bother. And they didn't. I never got any more anonymous letters because they knew they had to go and talk with somebody. Otherwise, we can't deal with it. So this is a very practical piece that Jesus gave us. I'm just wondering what your thoughts and your perspectives on this are.
I think that as a precursor to all of those steps, there's Jesus's admonition first to get the log out of your own eye.
Mm-hmm.
You got to sit down, as you said earlier, that you have to do some self-reflection.
Yep.
your own role in the conflict and whether or not you've got baggage that somehow needs to be dealt with before you even go and start step one in terms of talking to
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah. So the self-awareness is really the first step. Very good, Bob.
And I think too, dealing with conflict and even dealing with Matthew 18, the whole goal of Matthew 18 is not to win. The whole goal of Matthew 18 is to bring reconciliation,
Right.
to bring unity, to deal with the sin. And I have been on staff at a church where we actually applied this more than one time and found it hard for the congregation to go through. One of them came clear up to the congregation because we had to take the person out of membership. And that had to be part of that fourth step.
Hmm.
When it was applied, and even in that situation, that person came back with total humility, submission, confession, and reconciliation in front of the entire church. Over the years, though, I would have to say, and I don't want to make it absolute, but Matthew 18 is not used in church leadership near what it used to be to bring reconciliation. There's other means or there's other powers that happen. And I think it's really too bad because I think it's there purposely. Jesus has given us that for reconciliation. But it's not used near as much as it used to be.
So what is used?
Manipulation, lack of accountability, ignore. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
I find that personalities really play such a big part of conflict. There's when I have a conflict or I have to look at something, I keep trying to remember principles over personalities.
Good one.
Because the personalities you have relationships with people up into the conflict. They rub you the wrong way, or either way you have personalities involved. And sometimes I realize some of the personalities can be they're very good at that, to be able to build alliances before you even realize you've gotten to level 3 or 4. There's already alliances that you were not even aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, those are two different issues I kind of brought into that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
this is.
I would.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Dan. Yeah, I would add that one situation that I was involved with many years ago wound up going way too far. And I think that, some advice that I would have is that if you're in a position of leadership in the church and somebody comes to you, so they have the one-on-one with you, and they seem to be higher than level 3, my advice would be is to hear them out, but do not react to it in that meeting, because what wound up happening was the person who came one-on-one used the reaction to their advantage, because they were definitely looking for a fight. Unfortunately, they used it to their advantage, and now there was no proof or witness as to what the reaction was.
Right.
And so, although the intent is that it gets worked out one-on-one, if one of the parties is not willing to do that, and it's the other party, I would just say call a timeout and say, we need to get somebody else in here to at least listen to this, so that we have an objective observer to
Yes.
keep it from getting out of control and then it being used against somebody in that situation. And unfortunately, it was a situation where it was the hope that, and this goes back to the myth, it was the hope that, well, everything will probably be okay if I just try to pacify it and so forth. The approach was very relational, but unfortunately the other person was not interested in that, and they purposely used it to escalate the situation. So having a witness or calling a timeout, I think, could be a very appropriate thing to do at that initial stage.
And here's a bit of a clue back to this chart. You can
Yep.
tell what level this person is operating at by listening to this column.
Yep.
What is the style of their communication? Is there disrespect? Is there accusation? Do you sense hate? Well, if it is, you're exactly right, Art. Don't engage in lower level conversation. That won't work. You call the timeout and you say, we'll have to have another meeting, and you bring other people in. And the unfortunate thing is that many people wait too late.
Mhm.
And this is what denominational superintendents tell me all the time. By the time they're called, it's already at probably level 4. And you just have to do damage control. You can't really resolve it very well. So it's good to follow the teaching of Jesus and do it early, soon. So, friends, this is a very, very big subject. We're already at our hour here, so I want to honor the fact that this is the time we're at. I want to mention to you that in our Crest leadership, we have an academy where we go even deeper into this subject.
Mhm.
Let me tell you quickly, we call them a deep dive. And when we do this, you'll appreciate the complexity. It's even more complex than what we talked about so far. And will help you understand triggers and why you and they are getting triggered. We'll help you understand levels, which we just did today, and then God's deeper work that's going on, because the complexity of what's happening in here in conflict is quite astounding. If you understand the complexity, it can help you not get off track so quickly. And if you understand your triggers, boy, what a difference that makes. And if you can get the levels and you understand how to work with each level and realize there's a deeper work, what we do in Crest is we help people flourish. We're helping them, especially those who are in the second half of life, Christian leaders in the second half. That's our people. That's our specialty. People like you. So we just want to invite you to consider taking a look at our website here, what we're doing. But thank you very much for the invite to be a part of your fellowship for a little bit of time here.
Wow, Dan, that has absolutely been fantastic. Those of us who've been leaders always need to be open to the approach of teachableness, learning how to do a better job, and to bring that to Christian Business Board and use it as a Facebook Live has just been such a benefit of quality for people. And there's principles in here that can help you in your home, can help you, I would say, with teenagers, with business employees, colleagues, church leadership, in marriages. So thank you so much. And that's what CBB is about, is we are really wanting to give resources and support to people who want it. And that's why we want to hear from you. We do pray for you. We do have resources for you. And all you have to do is go to info@christianbusinessboard.com, and you will communicate with us. And Bob Strasberg will probably be one of the first people that will contact you. You can go on our website, christianbusinessboard.com, and look and listen to all the other events, always the third Monday night of the month. And we're going to have another one on January the 16th. You'll be seeing advertisement for that on our Facebook Live, and a lot of us send out notices. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because I'm hoping right now you're saying, well, how am I going to ask him a question? I really want to ask him something. So you can go to the chat room right now and write down a comment, write down a question that we will have some discussion. And Bob is going to lead that with Dan, that Q&A time just for you. So write down those questions and we'll take some of those. Also, don't forget crestleadership.ca for the website. And I already want to recommend, I want to hear the other part. I want you to come back, Dan, and take us deeper, because all of us are in leadership of some way or another. And if we can learn to do conflict resolution and reconciliation better for the glory of God, oh my, so be it. Hey, go to that chat room right now and put those questions down, okay? And I'm going to turn it over to Bob as he moderates that question time with Dan and with you, and then we'll have a few closing comments at the end. So get those questions on that chat.
Hey, Dan, thanks so much for what a great performance or presentation. Just so good to hear, the principles that help us all to be better leaders, no matter where we find ourselves. We do have a question in the chat about Crest, about how Crest focuses on the older leader.
Yes.
Why did you choose to focus on the older leader?
Oh, very good. Because there are dozens and hundreds of schools that deal with young emerging leaders, but there's next to nothing for people over age 40. And it's after age 40 that major life change can happen and major hits can happen. But we don't really support people well. We figure, well, if you're over 40, you must, you got life figured out. No, we don't. We need help in that latter half. And so the questions are different when you're older. The discussions are different. And we found that by having our clients, our people in that second half, we get a level of discussion and wisdom in that discussion that is phenomenal. I love it.
Well, thanks, Dan. It's good to know that there's a resource for people a little gray in their beards and in their hair.
That's right.
In my own consulting practice, when I've done conflict management training and coaching, or been in situations where people were at odds with each other and trying to navigate that with them, I have been amazed at how unself-aware people actually were in this process. And, trying to guide people into that awareness has been a real challenge at times. I used an instrument called the TK conflict assessment. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but do you have any assessment tools that you use or recommend to people to help build that self-awareness in preparation for getting into a conflict management situation?
Well, the self-awareness piece is what we teach in our CREST program. So I don't know, I'm not aware of a website per se that deals with that. So we just offer it as part of our, we do beyond our program, which is a diploma or a master's, we do individual consulting with organizations where we would walk them through things like this. But no, I don't have a tool per se on that.
Okay, thanks. I think there are a couple of assessments out there. I'm only familiar with the one,
Okay.
and it's very insightful. And you covered the bases that it talks about. So I think just getting people to reflect on themselves and think about how they respond when they get into a uncomfortable situation is probably the first key to that. And
Right.
be able to assist them in even beginning that reflection process is just so important.
Yep.
Right, we do have a couple of more questions. Let's see. What's been the most difficult issue that you've dealt with or are now dealing with, Dan? What can you describe a situation where this has been applicable?
Well, where I really learned this was when I was leading a large church. We had 1,200 people there, multiple staff, and then a number of issues all came together at the same time. And this one person decided that I was the problem and they should take me out. And they launched a personal. It was a win-lose. He or I were going to lose, and he came right in at level 4. And I had no idea what to do with them. So that's where I had to learn this. And then what we ended up doing was we had within our church a small committee called the Pastoral Relations Committee. And it was intended to be a select committee of people that helped between the pastor and people. If there was an issue that came up between pastor and people, they would deal with it. So I went to them and said, this has come up. And we read this book together and we learned these things together. And then they took the steps from there. And I had to step back and let them do it, because if I would do it, it would have been a personal fight, and I didn't want it to be a personal fight.
Mm.
So that was the most difficult thing that I had to do and learn on that one.
We've got a number of other questions around the training. What kinds of training do you offer through Quest? And do you do church leadership training on how to handle conflict? And a more general question about how did you develop the ministry?
Yes. Well, we do offer in things like this, webinars with organizations or with churches. We could do that. Or if it's applicable to be able to fly there and be with people, we do consultations with churches like that, and also with Christian business people. And then on our website, we are actually just going to be launching, it's not even public yet, we have a Crest Academy with all of these videos available by subject. And that's going to be an instant resource for people. If they're facing conflict, they just go and look at the webinar that we just did now. They can look at it. They can get training, and they can download the deep dives that are there. And then those who would like to really take it on themselves, we offer a diploma in Christian leadership. And so they can do it either in person with us in Alberta, Canada, but if you're far away like you folks, we do it all online as well. The same thing, but we have an online version. And then if you'd like to even go further, we have a master's in Christian leadership that brings it right and ties it all together at the top.
Excellent, excellent. Another question, what advice do you have for anyone who feels they have an issue with someone else to help talk themselves down to one of the more manageable levels before proceeding?
That's right. If you know you're triggered and you know you're upset, do not go into a meeting like that. That's for sure. What you need to do is you need to go to a trusted confidant. And I had to do this when I was under pressure like this. I was being aimed at. I went to a good friend and I said, friend, I need to ask you if you'd be willing to meet with me once a week to pray about a real problem I've got happening to me. But here's what I want to say to you. You must not talk to anybody else about this. Number one, you must not talk to anybody. It must be totally confidential. You must just listen to me and help me pray through this and maybe reflect back to me, but do nothing else than that. Would you be willing? And he said, sure. And I did. It was a safe place for me to vent and for me to unload and get upset about things. And he prayed with me, he helped me get some perspective. And he was a stabilizing force when I was going through the fire on this one. So that's what I would say. Then I was able to talk myself down, that I was at a better level when I was in a meeting.
Sounds like some of the conversations we've had at some of our CBB meetings.
Yes, or even in executive leadership meetings at churches.
Yeah.
Could you put the text number up again if someone wanted to get the Facebook, your PowerPoint?
Yes. Yeah, I sure
and-
can. I'll just
And
I'll just-
even the website again, and share great in your email, because I think that's very important to share with.
So here's the website. And then here's my email. You're welcome to contact me directly. And if you would like the notes for this today, here is, let me just find it. There's the number. And then just type the word conflict to that number. And the automation should get it to you.
I'll also be posting those on our christianbusinessboard.com website. When I put this in the past event category, I'll be posting the recording of this event and this information about how to get these important resources.
Yeah.
So I
Good.
know, and you've been very kind in sharing your PowerPoint decks. And so we will make sure that we'll put those in a place where people can get at them after the fact.
Yeah. For sure. And I'll send you the link for right to that deep dive. So you can really zero down into it.
Thank you so much. It's been so needed with the way our world is and how wound up tight, and how even churches knowing how to handle conflict, or having new startups or new leaders just coming in and having the maturity and wisdom on how to handle conflict. We really need wisdom, and to hear from somebody who's been there, been through it, how to handle it biblically, not be afraid to approach it that way and take the time. So thank you. Such quality, good stuff for us tonight. So
You're welcome.
appreciative.
You're welcome, Linda.
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time with us tonight, and we do hope that you will come back at some point in the future for a deeper dive, and we'll be in conversation about that. I would just also give a shout out to Don Hindenlang, our producer, for his efforts tonight and keeping us on track and resolving technical problems. So thank you, Don, for your ongoing hard work on our behalf. And we're looking forward to next month's presentation. We don't have our speaker identified yet. It will be on Monday, January 16th from 7 to 8 p.m. And we're sure that we'll have someone high caliber to be able to continue this leadership development conversation. So thank you on behalf of the Christian Business Board for being here tonight. And for all those who are going to watch this recording in the future, we wish you all a very blessed Christmas and a prosperous and happy New Year. And Dan, the very same to you, and
Thank you.
to everyone who's going to watch this in the future. God bless you all.
And you too.
Great. Thank you all. Merry Christmas.